The tow truck was already backing up to Marcus Rivera's vintage 1952 Ford 8N tractor when he pulled into his driveway at 7:15 a.m. For 3 months, he'd watched Patricia Henderson, the self-appointed HOA president, circle his property like a vulture, clipboard in hand, documenting every perceived violation. The retired tractor sat under an oak tree on what Patricia insisted was community green space. What Patricia didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just any homeowner. He was a civil engineer who'd spent 30 years surveying property boundaries and reading land deeds. And over the last 2 weeks, since Patricia's threatening letters started arriving, Marcus had pulled every document related to this development from the county recorder's office. The survey maps told a story Patricia wasn't going to like. But this morning, watching that tow truck driver attach chains to his grandfather's tractor, Marcus wasn't just documenting anymore. He was done playing defense. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story of justice served, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of karma and revenge. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's see exactly how this unfolded. This is a story in 3 parts. The violation that pushed a good person too far, the confrontation where power shifted completely, and the resolution where justice was finally served in the most satisfying way imaginable. The first part takes us through Marcus Rivera's nightmare as a self-appointed HO, a president with too much time and too little oversight decided his vintage tractor was an eyesore that violated community standards. For 3 months, Marcus endured increasingly aggressive notices, fines, and threats. He tried reasoning with Patricia, tried showing her his property documents, tried appealing to the actual HOA board that barely existed anymore. Every attempt at peaceful resolution ended with Patricia's condescending laugh and another fine tacked onto his account. The tractor wasn't just a piece of equipment. It was the last thing Marcus's grandfather had owned before passing away, the machine they'd restored together during his final summer. Watching Patricia order it towed felt like watching someone steal a piece of his soul. But that morning, standing in his driveway with his engineering expertise and 2 weeks of research behind him, Marcus realized something that made his blood run cold and his resolve turn to steel. Patricia had made one critical mistake. The second part reveals Marcus's carefully constructed trap. When Patricia arrived with her clipboard and smug expression, expecting another victory, she found herself facing a civil engineer who'd uncovered something extraordinary in the county records. The property lines weren't where anyone thought they were, not even close. And what Patricia had been calling community green space for the last 5 years had a very different legal designation. The final part delivers justice so perfectly calibrated, so completely devastating to Patricia's little empire of control, that it would ripple through the entire neighborhood for years to come. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply showing someone that the power they thought they had never existed at all. Marcus Rivera had never planned on becoming the neighborhood troublemaker. At 53, the civil engineer had spent 3 decades designing water treatment facilities and surveying commercial properties across Southern California. He bought the 2-acre property in the Sycamore Hills development specifically for its privacy, and the massive oak tree in what he believed was his side yard. The tree had sold him on the place. His grandfather, Miguel, had spent the last summer of his life helping Marcus restore a 1952 Ford 8N tractor in Marcus's old apartment complex parking lot, working through August heat and September evenings, teaching him about compression ratios and carburetor adjustments. When Miguel passed that November, Marcus inherited the tractor and a lifetime of memories attached to every bolt and bearing. Parking it under that oak tree felt like keeping his grandfather close. A tangible connection to the man who taught him that taking your time and doing things right mattered more than doing them fast. The first notice appeared on a Tuesday morning in late August, tucked under his windshield wiper in a plastic sleeve. Violation notice: unauthorized vehicle storage on common area green space. Fine, $150. Second notice: $300. Third notice, towing at owner's expense. Marcus read it twice, certain there was some mistake. The oak tree sat 30 feet from his driveway, well within what he'd always understood as his property line. The tractor had been parked there for 2 years without a single complaint. He'd assumed the notice was some administrative error, maybe meant for a different address. He tucked it into his glove compartment and went to work, thinking someone would realize the mistake and correct it. 2 weeks later, a second notice arrived, this time taped to his front door. The fine had doubled to $300. Final warning: remove vehicle from HOA common area within 72 hours or face towing and legal action. Per CC&R Section 7.3, no vehicles may be stored on community green spaces. Your continued violation shows blatant disregard for community standards. Respectfully, Patricia Henderson, HOA President. The condescending tone made Marcus's jaw clench. He pulled out his property survey from the purchase documents, the one he'd reviewed before buying. The lot lines clearly showed the oak tree within his boundaries. That evening, he walked over to Patricia Henderson's house 3 streets away. Survey in hand, ready to clear up what he still believed was a misunderstanding. Patricia answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater. Reading glasses perched on her head. She was maybe 60, with salon-perfect blonde hair and the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus introduced himself and explained the confusion, spreading his survey on her kitchen counter. Patricia barely glanced at it. "Those surveys are outdated, honey. The developer did a replat in 2008 before selling the remaining lots. Your tree sits on community space now. It's been 5 years. I'm surprised nobody told you before." Her tone suggested Marcus was simple for not knowing this already. When Marcus asked to see the updated survey, Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "It's filed with the county. You can look it up yourself. But that tractor is an eyesore, and it needs to go. We have standards here." Marcus left her house feeling patronized and angry, but not yet defeated. He'd look up the records himself. The third notice came with a certified letter. A $500 fine, now past due, and a notice that if the tractor wasn't removed by September 25th, it would be towed at Marcus's expense, and the HOA will place a lien on his property for unpaid fines. Marcus called the phone number listed for the HOA board. No answer. The voicemail was full. He tried emailing the board address. The email bounced back. He asked his neighbors about the HOA. Most shrugged. "Patricia runs everything," one told him. "There used to be a board, but people moved away. She's the only one left who cares." Another neighbor, an older man named Tom, pulled Marcus aside. "Just move the tractor, man. She'll make your life miserable otherwise. She tried to fine me for leaving my trash cans out overnight once. I had to threaten legal action before she backed down. But Marcus couldn't just move it. The tractor weighed nearly 2 tons and wasn't road legal. Moving it meant hiring a flatbed, finding storage, paying monthly fees. More than that, it meant letting Patricia win through intimidation and questionable authority. Marcus had built a career on precise measurements and legal property boundaries. Something about Patricia's dismissive attitude gnawed at him. That night, he logged into the county recorder's office database and started pulling every document related to Sycamore Hills, the original plat map, the 2008 documents Patricia mentioned, the CC&RS, the development agreement, and what he found buried in pages of legal descriptions and survey notes made him sit back in his chair and smile for the first time in weeks. Patricia Henderson had made a very expensive assumption. The oak tree and a significant portion of what she'd been calling community green space for 5 years wasn't community property at all. It was privately owned by someone Patricia had been systematically harassing for 3 months. And that someone was a civil engineer who knew exactly how to prove it. Marcus spent the next 2 weeks assembling his case like he would any engineering project. He pulled the original survey from 1987, when the development was first platted. He found the 2008 replat Patricia mentioned it existed, but it hadn't changed his property boundaries at all. It had subdivided 2 vacant lots on the opposite side of the development. He requested a professional survey from a licensed firm he'd worked with before, paying $1,200 for a complete boundary certification. The results were unambiguous. The oak tree sat 43 feet inside his property line. So did another half-acre of land Patricia had been treating as HOA common space. And here was the beautiful part. Patricia had been maintaining that common space for 5 years, mowing it, planting flowers on it, hosting neighborhood gatherings on it. She'd been trespassing on his property while simultaneously threatening to tow his belongings for being there. Marcus documented everything. Photographs with GPS coordinates, the threatening letters, his payment receipts showing he'd never authorized HOA maintenance. And on September 24th, the day before Patricia's towing deadline, Marcus prepared a response that would turn her little empire of control into rubble. September 25th arrived with California sunshine and temperatures, climbing toward 80 by mid-morning. Marcus called in sick to work, something he rarely did, and positioned himself on his front porch with coffee and a clear view of the oak tree. Patricia had been specific in her letter 8 a.m. removal deadline. At 7:45, right on schedule, a tow truck from Precision Auto Recovery turned onto his street. Marcus watched the driver survey the tractor, scratch his head, and make a phone call. Professional tow operators didn't love hauling farm equipment. Too much liability, too many things that could go wrong. But Patricia had apparently found one desperate enough for the job. The driver was halfway through backing up when Patricia's white Lexus SUV pulled to the curb. She emerged wearing pressed khakis and a lavender blouse, clipboard clutched like a weapon. She spotted Marcus on the porch, and her face lit up with something close to triumph. Marcus stood, set down his coffee, and walked slowly across his lawn. No rush. Let her enjoy this moment. It would be her last one for a while. "Good morning, Marcus," Patricia called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm glad you're here to witness this. Maybe next time you'll take HOA violations seriously." She made a note on her clipboard. "The towing fee is $450. You'll also need to pay your outstanding fines before we release the lien process. That's $1,100 total, due within 30 days. Marcus stopped 10 feet away, close enough to speak without shouting, far enough to maintain strategic distance. "Patricia, I need you to listen very carefully. That tow truck driver needs to stop what he's doing immediately." Patricia laughed, an ugly sound that confirmed everything Marcus had suspected about her character. "Oh, honey, that's not how this works. You had 3 months. You ignored every warning. Actions have consequences." "They certainly do," Marcus agreed. His voice stayed level, almost conversational. "Tell me, Patricia, how long have you been president of the HOA?" "5 years," she said, lifting her chin. "Since the Johnsons moved to Florida and nobody else wanted to volunteer. Someone has to maintain standards around here. And in those 5 years, how many board meetings have you held?" Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "That's none of your concern. The board operates as needed." "How many people are currently on the board besides you?" "The bylaws require 3 members. We're between appointments right now. But, so you're operating an HOA with 1 member, no meetings, and no oversight." "Interesting." Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket. "Let me ask you something else. In your capacity as HOA president, when did you last verify the actual property boundaries of the common areas you're supposedly protecting?" "I don't need to verify anything. I have the plat maps from the developer, from 1987, and the 2008 update. The 2008 replat that subdivided lots 17 and 18 on Maple Court." Marcus pulled up a PDF on his phone. "This one?" He turned the screen toward her. Patricia's expression shifted from confident to uncertain. "I don't recall the specific lots, because the 2008 replat didn't touch this section of the development at all. It's right here in the county records. Public information. which means you've been operating for 5 years under the assumption that your plat maps are accurate, without ever bothering to verify. Marcus switched to another document. Patricia Henderson, 59, 2847 Willow Creek Drive, retired office manager. HOA president since 2020. No formal training in property management, land surveying, or legal interpretation of deed restrictions. Is that accurate? Patricia's face went pale. How did you? That's private information. County voter registration is public record. LinkedIn is public. Your HOA president bio that you posted on the neighborhood Facebook page is definitely public. Marcus slid his phone back into his pocket. Now, let me tell you what I do for a living. I'm a licensed civil engineer with 30 years of experience in land surveying and property boundary determination. I've testified as an expert witness in 17 property disputes. I know how to read a survey map the way you know how to breathe. And 2 weeks ago, after your third threatening letter, I paid $1,200 for a professional boundary survey of my property by Morrison & Associates, the firm that handles most commercial surveys in this county. The tow truck driver had stopped working and was watching the conversation with growing interest. That survey, Marcus continued, certified by a licensed surveyor and filed with the county as of last Friday, shows definitively that the oak tree where my tractor is parked sits 43 feet inside my property boundaries. Not 43 inches. 43 feet. That's not a measurement error. That's not a gray area. That's my land. He let that sink in for 3 seconds. But here's where it gets really interesting, Patricia. That oak tree isn't the only thing on my property that you've been treating as common space. The survey shows that approximately half an acre of what you've been calling HOA green space for the last 5 years is actually part of my deeded lot. That includes the area where you hosted the neighborhood barbecue last month, the flower beds you planted last spring, the bench you installed without my permission. All of it. My property. Patricia's clipboard hand was shaking now. That's impossible. The developer made an error when they created the marketing materials. The pretty maps they gave to home buyers showed approximate boundaries for visual purposes only. The actual legal survey, the one recorded with my deed, tells a different story. I have 3 copies with me right now. One for you, one for that tow truck driver who's currently preparing to remove my property from my property, and one for the sheriff's department that I'll be contacting if this truck doesn't leave in the next 60 seconds. The tow truck driver cleared his throat. Ma'am, if there's a property dispute, I can't proceed with this removal. Company policy. Last thing I need is a lawsuit. There's no dispute. Patricia's voice had climbed an octave. He's bluffing. Marcus pulled a manila folder from under his arm and extracted a document. This is a certified survey from Morrison & Associates, dated September 15th, showing all boundary markers confirmed and photographed. This second document is the original survey from my property deed, recorded in 1987, which matches perfectly. This third document is a letter from my attorney, Yes. I hired one explaining that any removal of my property from my property constitutes theft, and any attempt to collect fines for violations on my private land constitutes extortion. The attorney's name is Jennifer Walsh. She handles property law exclusively. Her number is on the letterhead. You're welcome to call her. Patricia snatched the documents from Marcus's hand, her face cycling through shades of red and white. The tow truck driver was already unhooking his chains. Ma'am, I'm not touching this. You'll need to sort out your property lines before I can help. He nodded at Marcus. Sir. And then he climbed into his truck and drove away. The street fell quiet, except for a neighbor's sprinkler system and a distant dog barking. Patricia stood in the middle of Marcus's lawn, his lawn staring at the survey, documents like they were written in a foreign language. Here's what happens next, Marcus said quietly. You're going to withdraw every fine you've issued against me. You're going to provide written acknowledgement that you've been operating outside your authority. You're going to stop maintaining my private property immediately. And you're going to resign as HOA. president effective today and turn over all HOA documents and accounts to whatever board members still exist, or to the homeowners for a proper reorganization. You can't make me resign, no, but I can file a lawsuit for harassment, trespassing, and attempted theft. I can also file a complaint with the California Department of Real Estate for operating an HOA without proper authority or oversight. And I can request reimbursement for the 5 years of landscaping maintenance. You've been performing on my private land without authorization. Let's call it $200 a month. 60 months, $12,000. Marcus paused. Or you can resign quietly, admit you made a mistake with the property lines, and we all move forward. Your choice. You have 48 hours. Patricia's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. She turned and walked stiffly back to her Lexus, the survey documents clutched to her chest. Marcus watched her drive away, then walked over to his grandfather's tractor and ran his hand along the sun-warmed metal hood. "She picked the wrong guy, Grandpa," he said softly. Then he pulled out his phone and sent a text to his attorney. "She took the documents. I'll keep you posted." Jennifer replied instantly with a thumbs-up emoji and 3 words. Engineers always win. 47 hours later, at 6:30 p.m. on September 27th, Marcus's doorbell rang. Through the peephole, he saw Patricia Henderson, her husband Richard, a quiet man. Marcus had met once at a neighborhood garage sale, and an unfamiliar woman in business attire carrying a leather briefcase. Marcus opened the door. "Marcus," Patricia said stiffly. Her voice had lost all its previous condescension. "This is Ellen Pritchard. She's an attorney who specializes in HOA law. May we come in?" Marcus had expected this. He led them to his dining room, where he had already spread out his documents, the surveys, his deed, printouts of Patricia's threatening letters, photographs of the common area she'd been maintaining, and a timeline he created showing every interaction. Ellen Pritchard's eyes went straight to the survey maps. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Ellen did most of the talking. She'd reviewed the documents Patricia provided and confirmed what Marcus already knew: the property boundaries were exactly as Marcus claimed. The HOA had been operating on outdated assumptions, and Patricia had been enforcing rules against property she had no authority over. Ellen laid out a settlement agreement that her firm had drafted that afternoon. The HOA would withdraw all fines, provide written acknowledgement of the boundary error, and agree not to pursue any further action regarding the tractor or any other property on Marcus's confirmed lot lines. In exchange, Marcus would agree not to pursue legal action for the past trespassing and maintenance issues. "What about the $12,000 in landscaping maintenance I mentioned?" Marcus asked. Ellen didn't blink. "My client is willing to acknowledge the error, but cannot afford that level of restitution. She's operated the HOA on a volunteer basis for 5 years with minimal dues collection. The HOA account contains approximately $1,800. However, Mrs. Henderson is prepared to offer $5,000 from personal funds as a settlement, plus her resignation from the HOA board effective immediately." Marcus considered this. He didn't actually want Patricia's money. He wanted his peace back and assurance this wouldn't happen again. "I'll accept the withdrawal of fines and the acknowledgement of the boundary error. I don't need the $5,000, but I want the resignation in writing, delivered to every homeowner in Sycamore Hills with an explanation of why it happened. No spin, no face saving. The truth." Patricia flinched. Richard put his hand on her shoulder. Ellen made a note. "I'll draft a communication for your approval before distribution." "And one more thing," Marcus added. "The HOA needs to be properly reformed with actual board elections and oversight. If this neighborhood is going to have an HOA, it needs to follow its own bylaws. 3-person board minimum. Regular meetings. Proper record keeping. I'm not interested in joining, but I want assurance this doesn't happen to someone else." Ellen nodded. "Agreed. We'll work with the homeowners to restructure." She produced a settlement agreement. Marcus read every word twice, made 2 minor changes, and signed. Patricia signed with a shaking hand. Richard witnessed. Ellen packed up her briefcase at the door. Patricia finally spoke directly to Marcus. "I was trying to keep the neighborhood nice." "You were trying to control people," Marcus corrected, not unkindly. "There's a difference. Standards matter. But so does actually knowing what authority you have before you wield it." He held her gaze. "You never once apologized for calling my grandfather's tractor an eyesore. You never asked why it mattered to me. You just assumed you had power and used it. That's not leadership. That's just being a bully with a clipboard." Patricia's eyes watered, but she didn't respond. Richard guided her down the walkway to their car. Ellen stayed back. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "you handled this perfectly. Most people would have just moved the tractor and grumbled about it. You actually fixed the problem." "I'm an engineer," Marcus said. "We don't like unsolved problems." 3 days later, every house in Sycamore Hills received a letter. Patricia's resignation was brief and factual. She had operated as HOA president without proper oversight, had made errors in interpreting property boundaries, and was stepping down effective immediately. A homeowner meeting was scheduled for October 15 to elect a new board and review the association's bylaws. Marcus received 3 phone calls from neighbors thanking him. "She tried to fine me for my kid's basketball hoop," one said. "Said it was a violation. I'm glad someone finally stood up to her." The October meeting drew 43 homeowners, the largest turnout in the development's history. 3 new board members were elected, a retired teacher, an accountant, and a small business owner. Marcus attended, but declined nomination. The new board's first action was to hire a property management company to handle actual HOA business and verify all common area boundaries. Their second action was to update the bylaws to require annual audits and monthly meetings. Patricia Henderson did not attend. 2 months later, on a Saturday morning in December, Marcus was washing his grandfather's tractor under the oak tree when Tom, his neighbor from 3 houses down, walked over with 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want this," Tom said, handing one over. "Saw you out here working." "Just keeping it clean," Marcus said. Grandpa always said a well-maintained machine respects its operator. Tom looked at the tractor, then at the oak tree, then back at Marcus. "You know what I love about this? You didn't have to do any of it. You could have just moved the tractor to avoid the hassle. Would have been easier." Marcus took a sip of coffee. It was perfect black, strong, hot. Easier isn't always better. Sometimes the hard way is the only way that actually solves the problem. He ran his hand along the tractor's hood, warm in the morning sun. "My grandfather taught me that. He also taught me that when someone tells you something is impossible, what they really mean is they don't want to do the work to make it possible." Patricia thought I backed down because fighting back was too much effort. She calculated wrong. "You think she learned anything?" Tom asked. Marcus smiled. "Honestly? I don't know. But I know she won't harass anyone in this neighborhood again. And maybe that's enough." You looked up at the oak trees spreading branches, leaves turning gold in the winter light. Sometimes justice isn't about changing people. It's just about stopping them from causing more harm. Tom nodded, raised his coffee cup in a silent toast, and the 2 men stood there in companionable silence. The tractor gleamed in the sunlight. The oak tree stretched its branches overhead. And for the first time in months, Marcus Rivera felt the deep satisfaction of peace earned through precision, patience, and knowing exactly when to stop asking for help and start demanding respect. He'd done everything by the book. Every measurement, every document, every legal step. Patricia had come at him with assumptions and authority she didn't have. He'd responded with facts and expertise she couldn't challenge. And in the end, like every well-built structure he'd ever engineered, the truth had stood because it was built on solid foundation. His grandfather would have been proud, not because Marcus had won, but because he'd won the right way with patience, with evidence, and with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly where you stand. Across the country in Portland, Oregon, 42-year-old Rebecca Torres was reviewing the architectural plans for her custom home addition when her neighbor, Dale Morrison, marched onto her property and planted a survey stake directly through her freshly poured foundation. "This is 2 feet over the property line," Dale announced, his voice dripping with the confidence of someone who'd watched 3 YouTube videos on property law. "I'm calling the city. You'll have to tear it out." What Dale didn't know was that Rebecca wasn't just any homeowner. She was a senior surveyor with the Oregon Department of Transportation who'd spent 20 years resolving boundary disputes, and who had personally mapped this exact neighborhood for the county in 2019. When Dale threatened to call his attorney, Rebecca smiled the same calm, knowing smile that preceded every professional report she'd ever delivered, and said quietly, "Please do. I'd love to show him the survey I completed 3 years ago. The one that proves your fence is actually 18 inches onto my property." Dale's face went white. "Now, about you damaging my foundation, ... But that's a story for another time."